What happened next wasn't just a debate. It wasn't even a destruction. It was a public autopsy of a political career that should never have existed in the first place. Ilhan Omar walked into that Fox News town hall in Minneapolis, her own district, her own backyard, thinking she was protected. She walked in thinking her identity would shield her from scrutiny, thinking Donald Trump wouldn't dare bring up the evidence that had been accumulating for years like snow before an avalanche. She thought wrong. By the time 75 minutes had passed, even her own supporters were walking out. The squad was frantically deleting tweets. Democratic leadership was already drafting statements to distance themselves. And the woman who had wrapped herself in progressive rhetoric while committing federal crimes was finally, definitively, completely exposed. If you have been waiting years to see Ilhan Omar answer for what she has done to America, this is your moment. What Donald Trump did that night will be studied in political science classes as a masterclass on how to dismantle a reputation using only facts. The Fox News special town hall had been billed as Confronting the Squad, but everyone in the building knew it was really about one person. Bret Baier stood on the stage at the Minneapolis Convention Center, looking every bit the serious journalist trying to maintain control of what promised to be a chaotic evening. The atmosphere inside the convention center was suffocating, the air thick with a tension that felt less like a political forum and more like a gladiatorial arena. The audience of 300 was sharply divided, split 60-40 with Republicans and independents on the right side, and progressives and Omar's supporters on the left. But sitting in the very front row, separate from both groups, sat a silent jury that commanded the room's attention. There were 12 people wearing large, laminated photographs pinned to their chests. They sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the empty stage. These were photographs of people who would never attend another town hall. Photographs of fathers, mothers, and children who died on September 11th, 2001. The 9 over 11 families had come to Minneapolis, and their silence was louder than any chant from the crowd. Donald Trump entered first, executing his signature double point at the crowd as he strode across the stage. The right side of the room erupted in applause. He wore a navy suit, a red tie, and an American flag pin that gleamed under the harsh studio lights. He settled into his chair with the casual confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times and won 999 of them. He looked relaxed, almost dangerously so. Then came Omar. She wore a burgundy hijab paired with a sharp black blazer, projecting the carefully cultivated image of the serious congresswoman ready for a serious debate. Her supporters cheered wildly. Someone from the left side shouted, "We love you, Ilhan." She smiled that camera-ready smile, waved gracefully, and took her seat opposite the former president. She looked composed, perhaps even a little smug, unaware that the folder resting under Trump's chair contained the end of her career. Bret Baier cleared his throat, attempting to establish order before the chaos could begin. Welcome to a Fox News special town hall. Tonight, we will address critical issues facing our nation with President Trump and Representative Ilhan Omar. Let's begin with our first audience question. Bret, can I say something first? Trump leaned forward, cutting off the moderator before the first syllable was out. Baier sighed quietly, a micro-expression of resignation crossing his face. He already knew he had lost control of the timeline. Of course, Mr. President. Trump turned his body directly toward Omar, his expression uncharacteristically warm. I just want to thank Fox for putting this together, and I want to thank Ilhan for being here. I know Minneapolis is your home, your district, your people, so this takes courage. Coming here to face me, to answer questions, to defend your record. I respect that. I genuinely respect that. He paused, letting the compliment hang in the air. Omar nodded slightly, her guard lowering for a fraction of a second. Then the warmth vanished. The smile that spread across Trump's face transformed into the smile of a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. Because by the end of tonight, Trump continued, his voice dropping an octave, everyone in this room, everyone watching at home, is going to know exactly who you are and what you've done, and you won't be able to hide behind Islamophobia or racism or any of the other shields you use. Just facts, just evidence, just the truth. Omar's smile faltered. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear passed behind her eyes. So, thank you for being here, Trump said, leaning back into his chair. This is going to be very educational for everyone. Brett Baer looked like a man who already regretted every decision that led him to this moment. He had no idea it was about to get so much worse. The pleasantries were over. The surgery was about to begin. Baer gestured to the audience. The first question comes from a member of the local community. A microphone was handed to a middle-aged man in the fourth row. He stood up slowly. He was Somali-American, dressed modestly, with a look of deep concern etched onto his face. The room fell silent. Omar looked at him, expecting a softball question about local housing or health care, something she could spin into a stump speech. The man cleared his throat and looked directly at the Congresswoman. Representative Omar, you've spoken often about your refugee journey and how America gave you opportunity, but there are allegations about your immigration story that trouble many in our community. Allegations that go to the very heart of your identity and your legality in this country. Can you address them? The DNA challenge. Unsealing the immigration fraud evidence. Omar straightened in her chair, clearly prepared for this specific line of inquiry. She adjusted her microphone, her expression shifting from attentive listener to aggrieved victim with practiced ease. This was a script she had rehearsed 100 times in front of friendly reporters and sympathetic college crowds. She knew exactly how to play it. "Thank you for that question," she began, her voice steady and projecting a tone of weary patience. "Look, I've been very transparent about my story. I came here as a refugee. I worked hard. I became a citizen. And I'm living the American dream. These conspiracy theories about my family are nothing but Islamophobic smears designed to—" "Oh, here we go," Trump interrupted. He didn't shout, he didn't even raise his voice. He simply cut across her monologue with the casual dismissal of a man swatting away a fly. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the expression of someone who had just won a bet. He glanced at his watch, then out at the audience. Not even 5 minutes, and we're already at Islamophobia. That might be a record. The audience erupted in laughter. It wasn't the polite laughter of a studio audience. It was the sharp, surprised laughter of people who had been thinking the exact same thing. Omar's face flushed a deep, angry red. Her rhythm was broken. The shield she always used, the accusation of bigotry that usually silenced her critics, instantly had just been mocked. Trump leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, closing the physical distance between them. "Let me ask you something, Ilhan. Can I call you Ilhan? I'm going to call you Ilhan." He reached under his chair and pulled out a thick, black folder. It wasn't a prop. It was heavy with paper. "If these are just conspiracy theories, why won't you take a DNA test?" The room went dead silent. Omar blinked, momentarily stunned by the directness of the challenge. "That's an invasion of privacy," she shot back, her voice tightening. "It's a cheek swab," Trump countered instantly, enjoying the moment. "It takes 5 minutes. We could do it backstage right now." He gestured to the wings of the stage. "You know how you end conspiracy theories, Ilhan? You don't end them with speeches about racism. You end them with evidence. You end them with proof." He tapped the folder in his hands. "DNA that shows Ahmed Elmi isn't your brother. Done. Over. If the test shows you aren't siblings, I will personally apologize to you on national television. I'll buy the ad time myself." He paused, letting the offer hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. "But you won't do it." Omar didn't answer. She stared straight ahead, her jaw set, refusing to engage with the trap. But her silence was an answer in itself. "I'll tell you why," Trump said, opening the folder with a deliberate snap. "Because it's not a conspiracy theory. It's the truth, and I can prove it." The air in the convention center seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was the moment the autopsy truly began. Trump stood up and walked over to the massive digital screen behind them. He signaled to the control booth, and an image appeared crisp, high resolution, and damning. It was a document bearing the official seals of the British government. "This is Ahmed Noor, Said Elmi's school record from England," Trump explained, using a laser pointer to circle a specific line of text. "See this line here? Father's name, Noor Said Elmi. Born in Somalia. Fled during the Civil War." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another document, holding it up for the cameras before signaling for the screen to change. A new image replaced the school record. It was a faded, typewritten form, yellowed with age, but clearly legible. "And this," Trump boomed, his voice resonating to the back of the hall, "is your refugee application from 1995. He pointed to the corresponding line. "Father's name right here. Noor Said Elmi, from Somalia. Fled during the Civil War." Trump turned his back to the screen and faced the audience, spreading his hands wide. "Now, I'm not a genius. I didn't go to Harvard or Yale, though I went to a very good school. Very good. But I know this much. When two people have the same father, from the same country, fleeing the same war, at the same time, they are family. They are brother and sister. It's basic biology." The logic was simple, brutal, and inescapable. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. People were turning to each other, whispering, pointing at the screen. The visual evidence was far more powerful than any speech. Suddenly, a woman in the section reserved for Omar's supporters jumped to her feet. "That's not proof," she shouted, her voice shrill with desperation. "Names can be similar. You're lying." Trump didn't get angry. He nodded, as if he had expected exactly this objection. "You're right," he agreed, silencing the room with his concession. Same father's name could be a coincidence. An unusual coincidence, sure, but possible. Maybe there are two Noor Said Elmis who both fled the Civil War and sent children to the West. He walked back to his chair but didn't sit down. "So, let's look at more evidence." Another image flashed onto the screen. It was a marriage certificate, dated August 2009. "August 2009. You legally marry Ahmed Elmi," Trump narrated, walking closer to Omar's chair, invading her personal space just enough to make her uncomfortable. "Now, this is where it gets interesting, because at this exact same time, you are in what you call a cultural marriage with Ahmed Hirsi. You've been with Hirsi since 2002. You have 2 children with him at this point." He looked out at the audience, adopting a mock, confused expression. "So, you're culturally married to one guy, the father of your kids, and you legally marry another guy. That's complicated, but hey, modern relationships, right? Who am I to judge?" A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. Trump's tone hardened instantly. "Except, here's the thing. 3 lease agreements appeared on the screen, side by side. They were highlighted in yellow. From 2009 to 2011, all 3 of you, your legal husband, Ahmed Elmi, and your cultural husband, Ahmed Hirsi, are living at the same address," Trump revealed. "Same apartment in Columbia Heights. 1 apartment, 3 people." He turned slowly to look down at Omar. "That's not complicated, Ilhan. That's weird." He let the word hang there, letting the implication sink in. The idea of a woman living with 2 husbands in a small apartment was absurd on its face, unless it wasn't a marriage. "Unless," Trump continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly, "Ahmed Elmi isn't really your husband. Unless he's your brother. And unless you are committing immigration fraud to get him United States citizenship, the audience erupted. It wasn't just murmurs anymore. It was shouting. Shouts of anger from the right, shouts of denial from the left. Bret Baier half rose from his seat, raising a hand to try and restore order, but the momentum was entirely with Trump. He waited for the noise to die down, just enough to be heard, before delivering the next blow. "Here's my favorite piece of evidence," Trump said, signaling the booth again. "This is from Elmi's Instagram." He deleted it, like you delete everything, but the internet is forever. A photo appeared on the screen. It showed Ahmed Elmi holding a young child, Omar's daughter. He was smiling, looking at the camera. But it wasn't the photo that mattered. It was the caption underneath. Trump read it aloud. "My beautiful niece." He looked directly at Omar, his eyes locking onto hers. "Why would your husband call your daughter his niece? Can you explain that?" Omar's composure finally cracked. Her voice shook as she leaned into the microphone. "This has all been investigated and debunked. You are digging up old trash, too." "Has it?" Trump interrupted, pulling yet another document from his folder. He waved it in the air like a weapon. "Because I have here an internal memo from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, dated 2016. He opened the document and began to read. It says there were red flags raised about your marriage, that investigators recommended looking into potential marriage fraud. But it was blocked. He looked up, his expression fierce. "Politically blocked. Because you were running for office, and the Democrats didn't want the bad publicity. They didn't want to lose a seat." He tossed the paper onto the small table between them. "This isn't debunked, Ilhan. This is covered up." "There is a big difference." Trump walked back to center stage, standing alone in the spotlight. The prosecutorial, aggressive tone vanished, replaced by something somber, almost disappointed. "You know what the craziest part is?" he asked, addressing the room at large. "You came here as a refugee. America took you in when you had nothing. We gave you safety. We gave you shelter. We gave you opportunity." He paused, letting the weight of the country's generosity stand in contrast to the allegations. "And what did you do? You turned around and committed fraud. You abused the very immigration system that saved your life just to get your brother a citizenship he didn't earn, a citizenship that millions of people wait in line for, legally." He looked back at the Somali-American man who had asked the opening question, still standing in the fourth row. "This is why people are angry," Trump told him, his voice filled with empathy. "Not because of where she's from, not because of her religion, but because she is proof that the system can be abused. She is proof that we need stronger verification. She is living evidence of why border security matters." Trump turned back to Omar one last time for this round. "You want to call this Islamophobia? Fine, go ahead. But Islam doesn't teach people to commit fraud. Muslims are honest, hard-working people. You are the one disrespecting Islam by using it as a shield for criminal behavior." Several Muslim Americans in the audience were nodding. The camera caught a woman in a headscarf slowly removing her "I Stand with Ilhan" button and placing it in her purse. The accusation that Omar was using their faith to cover her own crimes struck a chord. "And here's the thing that really kills me," Trump continued, shaking his head as he sat back down. "Years later, after we educate you for free, by the way, American taxpayers paid for your school after we make you successful, after we elect you to Congress, you call us systemically racist." He looked at her with genuine disbelief. "The country that saved you, educated you, gave you everything, is racist?" The audacity, the ingratitude. Trump organized the papers in his folder, closing the chapter on immigration fraud. The audience was reeling, exhausted by the barrage of evidence, but Trump was just getting started. He leaned back, looking relaxed, as if he had all the time in the world. "But that's just the immigration fraud," he said, looking directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall. Wait till you hear what she said about 9/11, because that's when you'll really understand who she is. Some people did something. The 9/11 families speak. Actually, Brett, before we do that, Trump said, standing up slowly. His voice cut through the lingering tension of the immigration debate like a knife. I want to introduce some very special guests who are here tonight. Bret Baier paused, his hand halfway to his earpiece, sensing the shift in the room's energy. He had intended to pivot to a safe, policy-driven discussion on national security, something standard and predictable. But Donald Trump had no intention of letting the temperature drop. The cameras panned away from the stage, following Trump's gesture to the very front row. The 12 individuals sitting there had been quiet for the entire evening, motionless statues in a sea of political agitation. They weren't holding signs. They weren't wearing campaign hats. They were dressed in somber, respectful clothing, but it was what was pinned to their chests that made the breath catch in the throats of everyone watching. Each of them wore a large, laminated photograph. The faces in the photos were smiling, captured in moments of joy, weddings, graduations, family vacations, unaware that they were being memorialized. "These are 9/11 families," Trump said, his voice dropping to a register that was unusually quiet, stripped of his typical bombast. They traveled here to Minneapolis because they wanted to hear Ilhan Omar explain something. Something she said that hurt them very, very deeply. On the other side of the stage, Ilhan Omar's face drained of color. The defiant flush that had appeared during the immigration questioning vanished, replaced by a pallor of genuine dread. She knew exactly who these people were. She knew exactly what was coming. "Should we play the clip?" Trump asked, not looking at Omar, but at the control booth. "Mr. President, I'm not sure if—" Bret Baier started, trying to intervene. "Play it," Trump commanded. The massive screen behind them flickered to life, filling with footage from March 2019. It was a high-quality recording of Omar speaking at a CARE fundraiser. The audio was crisp, her voice passionate and booming as she addressed a cheering crowd. CARE was founded after 9/11, the video Omar declared, gesturing emphatically, because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Trump raised a hand and the video froze. The image of Omar, mouth mid-sentence, loomed over the stage. The silence that followed in the Minneapolis Convention Center was crushing. It wasn't the silence of boredom. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of collective shock. "Some people did something," Trump repeated softly. He let the words hang there, tasting the banality of them. That is how she described September 11th, 2001, the worst terrorist attack in American history, the murder of 2,977 innocent Americans. He looked out at the audience, his eyes hard. Some people did something, like it was a fender bender, like someone spilled coffee, like it was too minor to even name properly. In the front row, a man stood up. He was older, his shoulders hunched under the weight of decades of grief. He clutched the photograph on his chest with trembling hands. A microphone runner rushed to him, but he didn't wait. "My wife died in Tower 2, he said, his voice breaking instantly. The room was so quiet that his unamplified sob echoed. She was 29 years old. We had been married for 6 months. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She wasn't something. She was everything." Trump gestured for him to continue, offering him the floor with a solemn nod. "She called me from the 103rd floor," the man continued, tears streaming freely down his face now. "She said she loved me. She said she was scared. She asked me if I could see the fire from our apartment window." He took a jagged breath. Then the line went dead. "I watched her die." He looked directly at Omar, his eyes burning with a pain that time hadn't healed. "That is not something done by some people. That is murder. That is terrorism. Say their names. Say what they did." Next to him, an elderly woman struggled to her feet. She needed the help of the person beside her to stand, but once she was up, her posture was steel. "My son was a firefighter," she announced, her voice shaking with rage. "Michael Patterson. He didn't run away. He ran into those buildings when everyone else ran out. He saved 12 people before Tower 1 collapsed on him." She pointed a shaking finger at the congresswoman. "You will say his name." "Not some people, not something, Michael Patterson. Say it." Omar stammered, shifting in her seat, unable to meet the woman's gaze. I didn't mean to minimize the tragedy, but the context of civil liberties." "You did," Trump cut in, his voice sharp as a whip. "You did minimize it, and it wasn't a one-time mistake. It is a pattern." He turned back to the screen. 2013. On a Somali language forum. "You wrote this, and I am reading your words here. Americans overreact to 9/11. More people die from medical errors every year. They use the attack as an excuse for imperialism." Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the progressive section of the crowd seemed paralyzed. Comparing the mass murder of civilians to medical errors was a line that few were willing to cross. "You said Americans overreact to 9/11, Trump said, walking toward the edge of the stage, placing himself between Omar and the families. "Now, tell that to the families in this room. Look at them. Tell them they overreacted when they lost their husbands, their wives, their children, their parents." He didn't give her a chance to respond. He pulled another document from his jacket. "But wait, it gets worse," Trump said relentlessly. "Private messages to a progressive activist group leaked in 2020. You wrote, 'The American obsession with 9/11 is useful politically. When they question us, invoke Islamophobia and post-9/11 discrimination.'" He held the paper up for the cameras, make them feel guilty for their reaction to the attack. He read it again, slower this time, emphasizing every syllable. "Make them feel guilty for their reaction to the attack." He lowered the paper. "Not guilty for discriminating against Muslims. Guilty for reacting to 3,000 Americans being murdered." Trump walked toward the front row, his demeanor shifting from prosecutor to protector. "You saw 9/11 as a political opportunity, a weapon to use against grieving families, a way to manipulate people's grief into silence." A third family member stood up. It was a younger man, perhaps in his late 20s. His anger was different, less sorrowful, more furious. "I was 7 years old when my father died," he said, his voice ringing out clearly. "I grew up without him because some people did something. No, Islamic terrorists committed mass murder on American soil. Say the words. Say what they did." Trump turned to Omar. The trap was fully set. "Can you say it right now?" Trump asked. "In front of these families? Say these exact words. Islamic terrorists committed mass murder on September 11th, 2001. They were evil. The victims were innocent. I grieve for them without reservation." He held up 5 fingers, 5 sentences, no buts. No context about American foreign policy. Just 5 sentences of basic human decency. Can you do it? The camera zoomed in on Omar's face. Sweat was visible on her brow now. Her eyes darted from Trump to the families, then to the moderator. She opened her mouth. The attacks were terrible," she began, her voice gaining a little strength. "But we also have to acknowledge that American foreign policy in the region has contributed to a cycle of violence that—" "She can't do it!" Trump shouted, turning to the audience with his arms wide. "Even now, even with these families watching her, she cannot condemn terrorism without adding, 'But America deserved it.'" The crowd was growing restless. The anger in the room was palpable, a physical weight. Trump pulled one final document from his stack. "You want to know why she can't say it? Because she doesn't believe it. The FBI did a security clearance review on you in 2019. He snapped the paper open. Want to know what they found? This is from their internal memo. Subject shows troubling sympathy for anti-American narratives and inability to condemn terrorism without equivocation. Recommend denial of high-level security clearance. Trump looked up from the page, his eyes locking onto the camera. The FBI said, "You can't be trusted with America's secrets because you can't condemn terrorism clearly." But Democratic leadership overruled them. Politics over security. He walked down the steps of the stage, standing directly in front of the 9/11 families. He placed a hand on the shoulder of the man who had lost his wife in Tower 2. Every year on September 11th, these people wake up and relive the worst day of their lives, Trump said quietly. They see the towers fall in their minds. They remember the phone calls. They visit graves. His voice grew fierce, vibrating with controlled rage. And you call it something done by some people. Like their grief doesn't matter. Like American lives don't matter. Like remembering mass murder is just an American obsession. Trump turned to face Omar directly from the floor of the convention center. You know what the difference is between you and me? When I say something offensive, I own it. I don't apologize. Everyone knows that about me. But I don't hide. He pointed a finger at her accusingly. You said these things. You minimized 9/11. You called murdered Americans something done by some people. And when you got caught, you didn't own it. You called everyone who questioned you Islamophobic. He gestured to the 12 people sitting beside him. Are they Islamophobic? They're heartbroken. They're angry. They deserve an apology you will never give because you don't think you did anything wrong. Trump pulled out one final piece of paper, unfolding it with reverence. Want to know who agrees with me? Your own Imam. Imam Abdisalam Adam from the Islamic Center of Minneapolis. He released a statement about you. He read from the paper. I have counseled Representative Omar repeatedly about her rhetoric regarding 9/11 and terrorism, her refusal to clearly condemn terrorism, her minimization of the worst attack on American soil, her inability to express grief without political calculation. These actions shame our community. She does not represent Islam. She does not represent Somali Americans. She represents only herself. Trump folded the paper and placed it in his pocket. Your own spiritual leader says you bring shame to Muslims. Not me. Not Republicans. Your own Imam. He walked back up the stairs to his chair, leaving the families to be the visual focus of the room. Because real Muslim Americans love this country. They condemn terrorism. They grieve for 9/11 victims. They know you can be Muslim and American. They're not contradictory. He sat down heavily. But you can't do it. You can't love America because you fundamentally don't believe in American values. At that moment, 3 of the 9/11 family members stood up. They didn't say a word. They simply turned their backs on the stage and began to walk out. They were weeping. The husband of Sarah Mitchell paused for a moment, looking back at Omar with a look of profound pity before following them. The camera followed their exit, tracking them all the way to the doors. The silence in the hall was broken only by the sound of weeping from the audience. Social media exploded instantly. Within minutes, the hashtag number Say Their Names was trending worldwide, a digital tidal wave of solidarity with the families and condemnation for the congresswoman who couldn't bring herself to simply mourn. Trump looked at the camera, his expression grim. This woman hates America. And wait till you see who has been funding her campaign. The terrorist connections will blow your mind. Keep watching. Bret Baier, visibly shaken by the raw emotion of the segment, tried to steer the ship back to traditional waters. He shuffled his papers, looking for an exit ramp. Let's discuss Middle East policy, he suggested, his voice lacking conviction. And we will discuss it, Trump interrupted, leaning forward with renewed intensity. But first, let's talk about why she really hates Israel and who is paying her to hate Israel. Ancient hatreds. the anti-Semitism and terrorist ties. Brett Baer, visibly shaken by the raw emotion of the segment, tried to steer the ship back to traditional waters. He shuffled his papers, looking for an exit ramp. "Let's discuss Middle East policy," he suggested, his voice lacking conviction. "And oh, we will discuss it," Trump interrupted, leaning forward with renewed intensity. "But first, let's talk about why she really hates Israel and who is paying her to hate Israel." Omar sat up straighter, sensing a shift from the emotional to the political, a battlefield she felt more equipped to navigate. "I don't hate Israel," she retorted, her voice regaining some of its earlier steel. "I criticize their government's policies toward Palestinians." Using every anti-Semitic trope from the last 2,000 years, Trump finished for her, cutting off her defense before it could fully form. "Let's look at your greatest hits." He signaled the control booth again. A tweet appeared on the massive screen behind them. It was stark white text on a black background, dated February 2019. The words were infamous in political circles, but seeing them blown up to 10 feet tall gave them a new, darker weight. "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," the tweet read. "Benjamins," Trump said, letting the slang term hang in the air. "Money. You are saying Jews use money to buy politicians. That's not policy criticism, Ilhan. That is an anti-Semitic trope that has been used to justify pogroms and expulsions and genocide for 2,000 years. Omar opened her mouth to respond, likely to offer the same apology she had given when the tweet first caused a firestorm. But Trump kept going. He wasn't interested in apologies, he was interested in patterns. Another tweet replaced the first. This one was marked as deleted, but the screenshot remained. "AIPAC owns Congress," Trump read aloud. "Owns. Like their property. Like Jews own our government." He gestured for the next one. "Israel hypnotizes the world," the screen read. This one was dated all the way back to 2012. "You deleted it after you got elected," Trump noted, pointing a finger at the screen. "But you wrote it. You believed it." He turned to face her fully. "Hypnotizes. Puppet masters. Secret control. These are literal Nazi propaganda talking points. The idea that Jews manipulate and control the world through some mystical power." In the audience, a woman stood up. She wasn't holding a photo like the 9/11 families, but her presence was just as commanding. She was older, with silver hair and a look of profound dignity. "My grandparents survived the Holocaust," she said, her voice trembling slightly but clear enough to be heard without a microphone. "They heard these same words in Germany before their families were murdered. They started with words about money and control." Trump nodded at her, a gesture of solemn respect. "Exactly," he said. "This isn't political disagreement. This is ancient hatred with a progressive filter." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "This is from a private fundraiser," he announced. "Someone leaked it. Listen." He held the phone up to his microphone. The audio was grainy but unmistakable. It was Omar's voice, speaking to a room of donors. "The Jewish members of Congress can't be trusted on Middle East policy," the recording played. "They have divided loyalties. They put Israel first, America second." Trump stopped the recording. The phrase "divided loyalties" seemed to echo in the silence. "Dual loyalty," Trump said, ticking off the term on his fingers. "The accusation that has been used against Jews in every country they have ever lived in. You can't be trusted. You're loyal to your tribe, not your nation." He looked out at the audience. Used in the Dreyfus Affair in France, used in Nazi Germany, used in the Soviet Union, and now used by a sitting United States Congresswoman against her own Jewish colleagues. An older man in the audience, wearing a kippah, stood up slowly. "I am a Democrat," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have been a Democrat my whole life, and I am asking you to stop, please. These words, they lead to violence. They always do." Omar looked down at her hands, unable to meet the man's eyes. She tried to speak, to offer a nuance about lobbying groups versus individuals, but Trump wasn't done. "Here's what I don't get," Trump said, his tone shifting from historical lecture to logical dissection. "You tweet that Israel and America commit human rights abuses just like Hamas and the Taliban. You equate democracies with terrorist organizations." He brought up another tweet on the screen. It was a direct quote comparing the U.S. and Israel to Hamas. "Israel has courts," Trump listed, counting on his fingers. "Elections, rights for women, rights for gay people. Hamas throws gay people off buildings. Hamas uses children as human shields. Hamas celebrates when they murder Jews." He spread his hands wide, looking genuinely baffled. "But to you, they are the same. Why?" He leaned in closer. "I'll tell you why. Because they both oppose radical Islam. That is the only thing they have in common. And to you, anyone who opposes radical Islam is evil, whether they are a democracy or a terrorist organization." He walked back to his chair and picked up a new stack of financial documents. "Now, let's talk about who is paying you." "CARE," Trump said, holding up a logo of the Council on American Islamic Relations. "You have headlined their fundraisers. You are their star. Want to know what CARE is?" Documents appeared on the screen showing evidence from a federal court case. "The Holy Land Foundation trial," Trump explained. Federal prosecutors proved CAIR was founded by people with Hamas connections. Not alleged, not suspected, proven in a court of law. He pointed at the documents on the screen. "You raise money for them over $800,000 at their events, and they donate to you. $127,000 to your campaigns." More financial records flashed up. "Qatar Foundation board members," Trump read. "They donated $89,000 to you. Qatar hosts Hamas leadership. Qatar funds terrorism throughout the Middle East. But their money is good enough for your campaign." A photo appeared on the screen. It showed Omar smiling and shaking hands with Turkish government representatives. "And here you are," Trump narrated, meeting with Turkish officials later designated as supporting terrorist organizations. Smiling, shaking hands, taking their money. He walked to the center of the stage, standing between Omar and the audience. "You take money from terrorism supporters and then accuse Jews of buying influence. You meet with terrorists and then question the loyalty of Jewish Americans. The hypocrisy is breathtaking." He pulled out one final piece of paper. It wasn't a financial record or a tweet. It was a letter on congressional letterhead. "You know who has had enough?" Trump asked. "Your own party's Jewish members. This is a statement signed by every Jewish Democrat in Congress." He began to read. "We have tried for years to educate Representative Omar about anti-Semitic rhetoric. We have explained historical context. We have shown her how her words echo the darkest chapters of our history. She apologizes publicly and doubles down privately. The evidence presented tonight shows this isn't ignorance. It is hatred. We call for her removal from the Foreign Affairs Committee." Trump looked up from the letter. "Your own party, Jewish Democrats, they are done with you." He walked toward Omar, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, intimate in its seriousness. "You know what the most dangerous thing about anti-Semitism is? It starts with words. Always with words." He counted on his fingers again. Jews control the money. Jews have dual loyalty. Jews hypnotize the world. His voice hardened into steel. And then, once those ideas take root, bad things happen. 6 million people were murdered because of these ideas. 6 million. He pointed a finger directly at her face. "And you are spreading them on Twitter like they are just hot takes, like they are just political opinions, like there are no consequences." Trump turned to the audience, posing a hypothetical that silenced the room. "Let me ask everyone here something. If a white Republican congressman tweeted that black people were naturally violent, what would happen? He answered his own question immediately. They would be expelled from Congress immediately, unanimously. Gone. He pointed back at Omar. But she tweets anti-Semitic tropes over and over, and she is still on the Foreign Affairs Committee. She still has a platform. Why? Because she checks the right identity boxes. Omar finally found an opening. I criticize the Israeli government, not Jewish people, she shouted, her voice rising in desperation. No, Trump said flatly. You use ancient anti-Semitic tropes. You take money from terrorism supporters. You compare democracies to terrorist organizations, and you question the loyalty of your Jewish colleagues. He sat down, crossing his arms. That's not criticism. That's bigotry. And the only reason you get away with it is because Democrats are too afraid to call it what it is. In the Democratic section of the audience, the movement was subtle but visible. Several people were quietly removing their Omar campaign buttons. The shift in the room was palpable. The air had gone out of her defense. Think that's bad? Trump said, looking directly into the camera with a knowing look. Wait till you see what she did with campaign money. Her boyfriend got rich, very rich, off of donations from people who trusted her. He leaned forward. Share this if you think corruption is corruption, no matter who commits it. The love affair on the donor's dime. The $3.8 million scandal. Let's talk about Tim Minette. The name landed like a grenade in the center of the stage. Omar's entire body tensed. She shifted in her seat, her eyes darting briefly to the wings as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. She knew this name was the Achilles heel of her progressive branding, the crack in the armor that no amount of rhetoric could patch. Her boyfriend, Trump clarified with a smirk, leaning back comfortably. Well, husband now. But he was her boyfriend when she started paying him millions of dollars in campaign funds. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. Most people date normally, dinner and a movie, maybe some flowers. When Ilhan Omar dates someone, she pays them $3.8 million in campaign money. The number appeared on the screen behind them in massive, bold font. $3.8 million. Let that sink in, Trump said, pointing at the screen. $3.8 million. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of donations from hardworking people. He signaled for the next slide. A photo of a man appeared. He was bespectacled, smiling, looking like a standard Washington consultant. This is Tim Minette, Trump introduced him, marketing consultant. 38 years old. No major clients before Omar. No real track record of winning big campaigns. No special expertise that you can't find on any street corner in D.C. He paused for effect. But he is very good at one thing, dating his boss. Laughter rippled through the audience, and this time, even some of the progressives on the left side of the aisle were looking down, uncomfortable. The optics were indefensible. Let's look at the timeline, Trump said, assuming the role of a forensic accountant. 2018. Omar is married to Ahmed Hirsi. That's husband number 2 or 3, if you count the brother, which we definitely do. He winked at the crowd. Minette is married to Dr. Beth Minette. They are both married to other people. A new graphic appeared, showing a timeline of payments. Omar's campaign starts paying Minette's company, E Street Group, Trump narrated. First payment. $23,000 for consulting services. By the end of 2018, that number jumps to $230,000. He looked over at Omar, his expression genuinely curious. What kind of consulting is worth $230,000 from a first-term congresswoman? Did he write the Declaration of Independence for you? What did he do? Omar remained silent, her jaw clenched tight. 2019, Trump continued, the timeline moving forward on the screen. The payments increase, $350,000. And something else happens. He pulled a stapled document from his folder. April 2019. Beth Minette files for divorce. He held up the legal filing, and in her deposition, this is sworn testimony, under penalty of perjury, which means if she lies, she goes to jail, she says something very interesting. He put on his reading glasses, slowing down to emphasize every word. My husband told me he was in love with Ilhan Omar and wanted a divorce. When I asked how he could afford to leave me and our family, he said, and I quote, "Don't worry. Ilhan's campaign is paying for everything." The audience gasped. It was audible, a sharp intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. This wasn't just dry financial data, this was a personal betrayal funded by political donations. He told me their relationship became physical during campaign trips, Trump read on, his voice dripping with disdain. Trips that I now know were billed to her donors as political travel, romantic dinners in California, charged to Omar for Congress, hotel suites in New York, weekend getaways. He took off his glasses and looked directly at the camera. All paid for by people who thought they were funding a political revolution. They weren't funding a revolution. They were funding an affair. He tossed the divorce papers onto the table. After they got married in March 2020, did the payments stop? Did Tim Minette's company suddenly lose this valuable client to avoid a conflict of interest? He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. No! They increased. 2020, $1.1 million. 2021, $1.3 million. Launsenling Arshar, Joshuan Mayuan. The total flashed on the screen again. $3.8 million. Let me put that in perspective for you, Trump said, walking to the edge of the stage. That is enough to send 40 kids to college for 4 years, fully paid. That is enough to start 100 small businesses in Minneapolis. That is enough to provide premium health care for 1,000 families. He turned back to Omar, his voice rising. But instead, it went to your boyfriend's consulting firm. For what? What did he actually do? He pulled out a handful of flyers and printouts. I had my people look through your campaign materials. You know what we found? Generic social media posts, basic fundraising emails, standard political stuff that any junior consultant could do for $50,000 a year, tops. He spread his hands wide. So, what made Tim Minette worth $3.8 million? What special skills does he have? He paused, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Oh, right. He's sleeping with the client. The laughter was louder now, fueled by a mix of shock and the absurdity of the situation. Trump waited for it to subside before delivering the emotional hook. Let me read you some letters from your donors, he said, his tone shifting to something more somber. Real people, not corporations, people who gave you real money. He held up a printed email. Sarah Kay from Minneapolis writes, I donated $500 to your campaign because I believed in your message. I am a single mother working 2 jobs. That $500 meant something to me. It was my grocery money. And you spent it on your boyfriend's company? I feel betrayed. He picked up another one. James R. from Brooklyn. I maxed out to your campaign $2,800. I wanted to support a progressive woman of color in Congress. Instead, I funded your affair and enriched your husband. This is fraud. Trump looked at Omar, his eyes cold. These are real people, Ilhan, working people. People who trusted you with their hard-earned money, and you stole from them. Omar opened her mouth to object, but Trump held up a hand. Not directly. You're too smart for that. You didn't take cash out of the register. You laundered it through your boyfriend's company. You paid him for consulting. But it is still theft. It is still betrayal. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board already found you guilty of violations, Trump reminded her, bringing up another document. Not alleged. Guilty. You had to pay back $3,500 for personal travel, $2,500 for non-campaign expenses, $1,500 for using campaign funds to pay for personal tax preparation. He pointed a finger at the screen where the violations were listed. Tax preparation for fixing your fraudulent tax returns from when you were married to your brother. You used donor money to cover up your previous fraud. That is actually impressive. Fraud layered on top of fraud. It's a fraud lasagna. Those were minor clerical errors, Omar finally managed to say, her voice tight and defensive. $3.8 million isn't a clerical error. Trump shot back, his voice booming. And the Federal Election Commission is still investigating because that is federal. And federal investigations take time, but they are coming. He sat down, organizing his papers with deliberate slowness. You ran as a progressive. You said you would fight corruption. You said you would fight big money in politics. You said you would represent the working class. He looked directly at her. And the whole time, you were running your own corruption scheme, paying your boyfriend millions, stealing from donors, using campaign funds for personal expenses. He turned to the audience. You know what would happen to me if I paid my wife's company $3.8 million in campaign funds? I would be in prison. Immediately. CNN would have a countdown clock to my arrest. They would have a drone following my car. He pointed at Omar. But she is still in Congress, still on committees, still collecting her $174,000 salary, still taking donor money. Why? He answered his own question. Because she is protected, because Democrats won't hold her accountable, because identity politics matters more to them than corruption. Trump pulled out one final document, a single sheet of paper. Ilhan, I have a simple question. Your husband's company has received almost $4 million from your campaign. What exactly did they do to earn that money? Name one specific deliverable, one specific strategy that justified that price tag. Omar stammered. She talked about digital strategy and holistic consulting, using buzzwords that meant nothing. She couldn't name a single specific project. Trump smiled. That's what I thought. You got nothing. Because there is nothing, just corruption wrapped in progressive rhetoric, just theft disguised as consulting fees, just another politician getting rich while pretending to fight for the poor. He looked into the camera lens one last time for this segment. Share this if you think the FBI should investigate her campaign finances. Because this isn't politics, this is crime. The identity shield shattered. The final verdict. After being systematically dismantled on immigration fraud, her 9/11 comments, her anti-Semitic history, and the campaign finance scandal, Ilhan Omar finally played her last card. It was the only card she had left. This entire evening, she said, her voice shaking with palpable anger, has been nothing but Islamophobic attacks, racist conspiracy theories, and sexist targeting of a Muslim woman of color who dares to speak truth to power. There it was, the pivot, the predictable retreat to the fortress of identity. Donald Trump didn't get angry. He didn't interrupt. He actually clapped. I was waiting for it, he said with a grin, looking at the audience like a magician who had just successfully predicted a card. I was wondering how long it would take. 75 minutes? That might be a new record for you. The audience erupted in laughter. The tension that had built up during the financial segment released in a wave of recognition. They had all seen this movie before. Trump stood up, buttoning his jacket. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed is what I call the identity shield. It is like a magic trick. Watch how it works. He held up his hand, counting off on his fingers. I present evidence of immigration fraud, Islamophobic. I show her minimizing 9/11 racist. I prove she paid her boyfriend $3.8 million in campaign funds, sexist. I quote her own anti-Semitic tweets, all of the above. He spread his hands wide. Everything becomes about her identity. Nothing becomes about her actions. It is brilliant. Really evil, but brilliant. He turned back to the big screen. Let me show you the pattern. This isn't new. This is the only play in her playbook. A montage began to play. It was a supercut of Omar's greatest deflections. Clip 1. A reporter asks about the marriage fraud allegations in 2018. Omar's response. This is an Islamophobic smear campaign designed to silence a Muslim woman. Clip 2. A question about the All About the Benjamins tweet. Omar's response. These are racist attacks meant to distract from my message. Clip 3. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board violations. Omar's response. Sexist targeting because I am a woman who won't be silent. Clip 4. The 9/11. Some people did something comment. Omar's response. They are taking my words out of context to attack Muslims. Trump turned to the audience as the clips ended. See the pattern? Every single time she gets caught, she doesn't defend her actions. She attacks her critics. She makes you the villain for noticing her crimes. He walked to center stage, his voice rising. She doesn't say, "Here is why Ahmed Elmi isn't my brother." She says, "You are racist for asking." She doesn't say, "Here is why I can condemn terrorism clearly." She says, "Asking me to do that is Islamophobic." It is not a defense, it is a deflection. And it has worked for years because Democrats are terrified of being called racist. He signaled for the next slide. But you know what? A lot of people have criticized you. Let's see if they are all bigots. Photos appeared on the screen. They were faces of Muslim Americans, prominent figures. Imam Abdisalam Adam, Representative Andre Carson, Dalia Mogahed, Azra Nomani, multiple community leaders from the Cedar Riverside neighborhood in Minneapolis. Trump read their quotes from the screen. She brings shame to our community. Her actions don't represent Islam. She is using her religion as a shield for corruption. Muslim Americans can condemn terrorism without caveat. She won't. He turned to Omar, his expression genuinely inquisitive. These are Muslims, Ilhan. American Muslims who love this country. Are they Islamophobic? Are they engaging in Islamophobic attacks against themselves? He didn't wait for an answer. More photos appeared. Women from across the political spectrum, Republicans, Democrats, independents who had criticized her policies and her conduct. Are all these women sexist? Trump asked. Are all these women engaged in sexist attacks on a woman? Finally, photos of Somali Americans from Minneapolis appeared. Community elders, refugee advocates, former supporters who had turned their backs on her. Are they racist against Somali Americans? Trump asked. Against their own community? Against their own neighbors? He walked back to his chair and sat down, leaning forward. You see how ridiculous this is? When everyone who criticizes you, regardless of their religion, their race, or their gender, is somehow a bigot. Maybe the problem isn't them. He pointed a finger at her. Maybe the problem is you. The room was silent. The logic was inescapable. The identity shield had been shattered, piece by piece. Here is what you are doing, Trump said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost professorial tone. And I want everyone to understand this because it is important. You are not defending yourself because you can't defend yourself. The evidence is overwhelming. The fraud is clear. The corruption is documented. He gestured to the pile of documents on the table. So, instead, you make it about identity. You make the people who notice your crimes into the bad guys. His voice rose again, filling the hall. You're only questioning me because I'm Muslim? No. We are questioning you because you married your brother. You're only investigating me because I'm black? No. We are investigating you because you stole campaign funds. You're only criticizing me because I'm a woman? No, we are criticizing you because you minimized 9/11. Trump stood up, energized. Your identity has nothing to do with it. Your actions have everything to do with it. He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. And you know what I'm going to say? What everyone else is too afraid to say. What people whisper in private, but won't say in public because they are scared of being called racist. He looked directly into the camera, addressing the nation. Being Muslim doesn't give you permission to commit fraud. Being black doesn't give you permission to spread anti-Semitism. Being a woman doesn't give you permission to steal from donors. Being an immigrant doesn't give you permission to abuse the immigration system. The audience erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause, it was a release. Even some people on the left side of the aisle were clapping. The relief of finally hearing someone say it out loud was palpable. Trump waited for the silence to return. Your identity doesn't shield you from accountability. It doesn't make you special. It doesn't make you untouchable. His voice hardened. You are an American citizen. You are a United States Congresswoman, and you are subject to the same laws as everyone else, the same standards, the same consequences. He pointed at her. You have been playing this game for years, using identity as a weapon, making people afraid to criticize you because they might be called racist or Islamophobic or sexist. He smiled, a genuine, fearless smile. Well, I'm not afraid. You know why? Because I don't care what you call me. I've been called everything already. Racist, sexist, Islamophobic, homophobic, xenophobic. I've heard them all. They don't work on me anymore. He sat down. So, call me whatever you want. But I am still going to tell the truth. And the truth is, you are a criminal who happens to be Muslim, not a victim. A criminal. The standing ovation was deafening. People on both sides were on their feet. Even the reporters in the back were clapping. Trump let the applause wash over the room, then looked at the camera. One more round, he said. The final takedown. This is where we bring it all together and show you who she really is. Stay with me. This is the part you've been waiting for. Trump stood in the center of the stage, his tone shifting from aggressive to almost philosophical. You know, I've been thinking about something all night, something that really bothers me. He looked directly at Omar. America gave you everything. Think about that for a second. Everything. He started pacing slowly. You came here as a refugee, 12 years old, fleeing a war-torn country. You had nothing. You had seen horrors most Americans can't even imagine. You were desperate, scared, hopeless. His voice got softer. And America, this country you now attack at every opportunity, opened its arms. We took you in. We gave you safety when you had none. We gave you shelter. We gave you food. We gave you a future. Trump stopped walking. We educated you for free. American taxpayers paid for your school, your teachers, your books. We made you a citizen. We gave you rights. We gave you opportunity. He turned to face her fully. And then, this is the amazing part. We elected you to Congress. A Somali refugee became a United States Congresswoman. That is not just the American dream. That is proof that America works. That is proof that this country is special. He paused, letting it sink in. And how did you repay us? He pulled up a timeline on the screen. It showed every step of her journey juxtaposed with her betrayals. 1,995. America accepts you as a refugee. Your response later, commit immigration fraud to get your brother citizenship. 1997 to 2000. America educates you for free. Your response later, claim America is systemically racist. September 11, 2001. America attacked by terrorists. Your response, minimize it as some people did something. 2018. Americans elect you to Congress. Your response: start stealing campaign funds through your boyfriend. 2019. Given a platform, committees, power. Your response: equate America with terrorist organizations. Trump gestured at the timeline. Every step of the way, America gave you chances. America was generous. America was forgiving. America believed in you. His voice hardened. And every step of the way, you spit in our face. He walked closer to her chair. You are not a victim of America. You are a parasite, feeding on America while killing the host. You're not a victim, Trump said slowly, delivering the final verdict. You're a traitor. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. I don't use that word lightly, Trump continued. I know what it means, but that is what you are. Not a traitor because you criticize policy. That's American. Not a traitor because you disagree with me. That's democracy. He stopped in front of her. A traitor because you have systematically worked against American interests while pretending to represent American values. You have taken money from foreign actors connected to terrorism. You have spread propaganda that helps our enemies. You have weakened us from within while living off our generosity. He turned to the audience. That is textbook betrayal. He walked to the front row, standing among the 9 over 11 families again. So here is my final challenge, Elon, right now, in front of everyone watching. His voice got quiet. Say 8 sentences, just 8. He counted them off. I love America. I am grateful to America. America saved my life and gave me opportunities I could never have had anywhere else. I was wrong to minimize 9 over 11. I was wrong to spread anti-Semitism. I was wrong to commit fraud. I condemn terrorism without reservation. I am sorry. He looked at her. 8 sentences. Can you say them? Omar opened her mouth. She looked at the teleprompter, then at the audience. The attacks were terrible. But we also need to understand the context of American foreign policy in the Middle East and the way that colonialism and imperialism. She can't do it, Trump said to the audience, shaking his head. Even now, even after everything. She cannot bring herself to say she loves America without adding but. He turned back to her. Because you don't. You hate us, and you always have. Trump addressed the Minneapolis crowd directly. You elected her. You trusted her. You gave her this power. She is your congresswoman. He spread his hands. The question is, do you still want her? Because she has lied to you. She has stolen from you. She has embarrassed you. She has made your city, this great American city, synonymous with corruption and anti-American hatred. Several Omar supporters in the audience stood up and walked out. Others were removing their buttons, their signs. The betrayal was too much. Trump's voice got quiet but fierce. America gave you everything, Ilhan Omar. We saved your life. We gave you freedom. We gave you opportunity. We gave you power. He pointed at her. And you gave us nothing but contempt, fraud, and hatred in return. Trump walked back to his chair and sat down. You don't deserve to represent anyone. You don't deserve to be in Congress. And honestly, you don't deserve to be an American citizen. He let that sink in. Because citizenship isn't just a piece of paper. It is a commitment, a loyalty, a gratitude for what this country represents. He looked directly at her. And you have none of those things. The unraveling. A legacy erased in 24 hours. Trump gathered his papers, tapping them into a neat stack. The sound echoed in the silent hall. That is all I have to say, Brett. I'm done. She can respond if she wants, but I don't think there is anything she can say that will fix what everyone just learned about who she really is. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Omar's most ardent defenders sat stunned, unable to process the systematic, evidence-based destruction they had just witnessed. Omar sat frozen, her political career smoldering in ruins around her. Trump looked at the camera one last time. Share this everywhere. Tag your representatives. Demand accountability. This woman cannot be allowed to stay in Congress. America deserves better. The town hall ended at 9:47 p.m. Central Time. By 9:53, number Omar Exposed was trending #1 worldwide. The digital tsunami was instantaneous and overwhelming. Within the first hour, video clips of the DNA evidence and the 9/11 family's confrontation had racked up 40 million views across platforms. The Internet, usually a fractured landscape of echo chambers, was united in shock. Inside the convention center, the scene was chaotic. Omar tried to leave through a side exit, flanked by security, but the mood outside had shifted dangerously. Former supporters were gathered near the loading docks, not to cheer, but to chant, "Resign, resign, resign." Camera crews swarmed the exit, capturing footage of a woman who looked nothing like the confident figure who had walked in 90 minutes earlier. Her head was down, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the late hour. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just ran. Back in the studio, Bret Baier's post-show panel was somber. The usual partisan bickering was absent. In 30 years of journalism, Baier said directly to the camera, his face pale, "I have never seen anything like that." The evidence President Trump presented tonight raises serious questions that demand immediate investigation. This wasn't a debate. It was an indictment. The political fallout began before the broadcast even ended. Within 20 minutes, the squad was in crisis mode. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted and deleted 3 times before finally settling on a neutral, safe statement. No comment at this time. Rashida Tlaib quietly deleted a pro-Omar tweet from earlier that day. Then, the leaks began. At 10:32 p.m., screenshots of text messages, allegedly between squad members, hit Twitter. The message was brutal in its pragmatism. "We can't defend this anymore. She's radioactive. Distance as soon as possible before this touches all of us." By the next morning, the media landscape had transformed. Outlets that had spent years defending Omar were suddenly asking hard questions. CNN ran a chyron, mounting questions over Omar's financial dealings. MSNBC hosted a panel discussing Democratic leaders distancing themselves amid Omar controversy. The New York Times published a piece titled "The Unraveling: How Ilhan Omar Lost Her Party's Support in One Night." The Washington Post's fact-checker rated most of Trump's claims as true or mostly true. At 11 a.m., the hammer dropped. Nancy Pelosi released a statement. It was carefully worded, legalistic, and devastating. The allegations raised require immediate and thorough investigation. Representative Omar has been removed from the Foreign Affairs Committee pending review by the House Ethics Committee. Chuck Schumer was overheard telling donors privately, "We need candidates who can win, not candidates who can trend." By that afternoon, the gears of the federal government were turning. The FBI issued a rare confirmation. The FBI can confirm we have opened investigations into allegations of immigration fraud, campaign finance violations, and related matters concerning Representative Ilhan Omar. The IRS Criminal Division announced a review of tax filings. The Minnesota Attorney General launched a preliminary review of state campaign finance violations. 1 week later, the numbers came in. Omar's approval rating in her district had dropped 23 points. It was an unprecedented collapse. Don Samuels, a moderate Democrat who had nearly defeated her in the previous primary, wasted no time. He announced his candidacy with an ad that went viral within hours. It featured no voiceover, just footage of Omar's scandals playing over a black screen, interspersed with the simple tagline, "Minneapolis deserves better. Don Samuels for Congress." Within 48 hours, polls showed him leading by 17 points. Omar became a pariah in the capital. She walked the halls alone. Colleagues avoided eye contact. She was uninvited from fundraisers. Major donors stopped returning her calls. Her campaign war chest, once overflowing, began hemorrhaging money to legal fees. Even the international community reacted. Israel's foreign ministry issued a statement. "We have warned about her anti-Semitism for years. Perhaps now American voters will listen." The Somali government distanced itself, stating she does not represent Somali values of gratitude and honor. Egypt's Al-Azhar University issued a fatwa-like statement condemning fraud as shameful to Islam. 2 weeks after the town hall, Omar attempted damage control. She agreed to an interview on MSNBC. It was a disaster. When asked directly about the DNA test, she deflected again to identity politics. But the DNA test would clear this up instantly, the interviewer pressed. "That is an invasion of privacy designed to humiliate Muslim women," Omar insisted. "Or it would prove your innocence in 5 minutes," the interviewer countered. She had no answer. The clip was ratioed 5-0-1 on social media, with comments from her own former supporters begging her to just take the test. 6 weeks after the town hall, the end came. It was a Tuesday. Ilhan Omar called a press conference in Minneapolis. The room was packed, but the energy was funeral. She looked exhausted, defeated. The fire was gone from her eyes. She stood at the podium alone. There were no squad members behind her, no local leaders, just her. After careful consideration, she read from a prepared statement, her voice barely a whisper. "I have decided not to seek re-election in 2024. I will complete my current term focused on serving my constituents, and will cooperate fully with all ongoing investigations." She didn't take questions. She turned and walked away, ignoring the shouted inquiries about the DNA test, about the money, about her brother. Trump's response was a single tweet. "Good. Now resign completely instead of just declining to run." But I guess this is progress. America is healing. It received 83,000 retweets in 90 minutes. In the months that followed, pulling an Omar entered the political lexicon. It became shorthand for using identity politics to shield corruption. Democratic strategists actively distanced themselves from her brand of politics, emphasizing legislative achievements over viral moments. In Minneapolis, the physical landscape changed. Campaign signs appeared throughout the district. "Never again." Accountability over identity. Minnesota deserves better. The city that had proudly elected the first Somali-American congresswoman now saw her as an embarrassment. Local Somali leaders worked overtime to repair the community's reputation, emphasizing that Omar was an outlier, not a representative. The refugee who became a congresswoman became a cautionary tale about the American system. Not a tale about racism or Islamophobia, but a tale about accountability, about how no one, regardless of their identity, is above the law. She had been given everything. Safety when she was in danger, opportunity when she had nothing, education, citizenship, power, and she had thrown it all away for fraud, hatred, and personal enrichment. America had opened its arms to her, and she had bitten the hand that fed her. This is what happens when you expose the truth. When you refuse to be intimidated by accusations of bigotry. When you demand accountability regardless of race, religion, or gender. Ilhan Omar's career didn't end because of a vast right-wing conspiracy. It ended because Americans finally saw who she really was. A fraud who abused every system that saved her life. Share this story. Tag your representatives. Demand they take action. Because if we don't hold our leaders accountable, who will? If you believe no one is above the law, not even a congresswoman hiding behind identity politics, then America is worth fighting for. Let's fight.